News that we have successfully started this afternoon's broadcast. 3 game slate this evening. Hope those of you who are playing NFL are doing well. No matter what you think about drafting Saquon Barkley in the first round. I am Fast Eddie Fear. Again, 3 games tonight. Hopefully better than the last 3 game slate we saw. As a point of fact, let's never talk about that 3 game slate again. Or quite possibly the closest game of the 3 games was the Suns being blown out by 22. That was the nail-biter of the evening. Anthony Davis left the game earlier, but has returned to the game. If you were watching a pretty good Pistons-Pelicans game that took enough of my attention, I'm actually getting a little bit late. Not a ton of news here, not a lot of injuries here. Not 3 gate games, but 3 close games. I will say the first game, the Bucks and the Raptors, I have a lot of personal interest in. The Raptors, you can make an argument for them being the best team in the league right now. Again, Draymond returns tomorrow. That probably tilts them from being the best team in the league to the second best team in the league for me. But they've been really impressive. Obviously, an incredibly deep team. They have at least 11 guys who could start any evening on an NBA team. So let me get the YouTube chat, the restreamer as you will, up and running there. And we will get into discussing today's contests. So, here we go. Sunday's always fun. Again, probably by stats the most profitable day of the year, either Sunday or Monday. A lot of people... A lot of your more studly DFS players have a lot of money tied up in their NFL action. And so it's a little easier when you don't have the monster DFS players of the world dropping 150 lineups into every guaranteed contest. So... not much new to talk about. So sure, let's go ahead and get underway talking about this first game, the Bucks and the Raptors. For a really good basketball game, I have not a ton of interest in this game. It is the game I like the least of these 3, even though it has the highest over-under in this. Like many things in DFS, it just has to do with the pricing on many of the guys. So these 2 teams did play earlier this year, but it doesn't tell us a hell of a lot because Giannis didn't play and Kawhi didn't play, and even sans Giannis, the Bucks handled them pretty easily. So this was during the Kawhi ducking all the other elite small forwards phase of the year. But this is not a back-to-back, so Kawhi obviously back in here. Basically everyone back in and playing here. I believe George Hill will play, which is interesting. I'm not sure he will actually step on the court. There is a real chance they don't feel, a need to press him in here. But if there's a blowout, maybe you left a few minutes of George Hill slide into your rotation. But, is available to play, which is interesting. He was supposed to not be available until tomorrow, where on the back-to-back the Bucks get a piece of the Cavaliers. Speaking of back-to-backs here, we have the Pistons who are playing now. But the Bucks, the Pelicans who are playing now, and the Jazz all play tomorrow. So for the purposes of our late slate, just the Bucks and the Jazz on the front ends of a back-to-back, and the Knicks on the back end. So only half the teams on back-to-backs, but for what it's worth, you can be slightly less afeared of the minutes for the other teams here. So again, the Bucks on the front end of a back-to-back. Even in that last game where they handled their business fairly well, even without Giannis there, you did not get a ton of wonderful fantasy performances here. I guess we'll start talking about Khris Middleton. The price starting to come somewhere I want to take a risk on. I'm very interested in Khris Middleton in tournaments because he should be the lowest owned of the guys who have a legit 50-60 fantasy point upside. Obviously, everyone being healthy does not help him. 1 or 2 trade plants coming to town does not help him. Playing the best wing defense team in the NBA does not help him. but the pace is decent. This is the fastest game of the day, and there's just a certain point where you're going to, lay down a bucket of shots. So I again think this is very... I think I would slightly rather play Tim Hardaway, because I do think based on his absolutely shitful showing yesterday, his ownership is depressed, not quite as much as Middleton's, but I do like that matchup a little bit more. Obviously, I'm going to like matchups with anyone but the Raptors a little bit more, but, Middleton's going to be really low owned for Khris Middleton on a 3-game slate, and certainly should play, and does have a huge upside based on that. So there is no real reason for me to like a Middleton play here, except for the fact that the ownership is going to be pretty well squished. But that's certainly a good enough reason on a 3-game slate. There are just a lot of times you go, wow, this guy's in an abjectly horrible spot, but the guy's still got a lot of talent, and it's a 3-game slate. If I think he's 15-20% owned, it's just worth taking the risk based purely on what we expect that ownership dissemination to be. So last night, late slate was tilting. For those of you who... one of the most interesting periods of time last night. We're going into the late slate of 2 games, which is Minnesota playing the Timberwolves and, Miami in the other late game. And about 10 minutes to 10, which is when the biggest of the last slate starts, at 10 o'clock there was a 2-game late slate with the 10 and the 10:30. We got news at like 9:52 that both Robert Covington and Josh Richardson would not play, which Covington had been probable and Richardson had no injury designation and was in fact a pretty nice play. He was under 7,000 on both sites. They were going into the Suns, which is one of the best matchups you can possibly have, and there was no Whiteside and no Dragic. So that looks exceptional, and so some exceptional pivots were made, one of which was, try to get as much Tyler Johnson as you could have. Which made a lot of sense, which we'll come back to in a second. So the late game start. Around 10:10, Boban is starting for... And I want to see how that actually ended up, because I did not check his final stats. But around 10:10, Boban news came out that Boban would randomly start for the Clips. Sorry, they weren't playing the Suns. They were playing the Clips. Looking at a lot of stuff from yesterday, getting my shit twisted up with the back-to-backs. But... and that really surprised me, and I ended up being fairly anti-Boban just because of the fact that this is one of the worst matchups you can have as Boban guarding any of their centers. He's not going to be good at guarding. Like, he wants to guard a sort of traditional center who doesn't go out that much. And Miami was going to run lots of Bam Adebayo, which isn't a good guard for him, and Kelly Olynyk at center, which isn't a good guard for him. And they hadn't played Boban much at all recently, and they... picked a really odd spot to get. All right, so that worked out well. So a lot of people are like, slam Boban, slam Boban. I'm like, I don't think I like Boban here. Now, I'm terrified by the fact that Doc Rivers takes this spot to start the creature from the Black Lagoon. Yeah, he played 13 minutes, 8 points, 4 rebounds, and a steal, and 3 turnovers. So, yeah, that was a really weird one. Gortat did not play, but I didn't see news of an injury. So, barring Gortat... saying he had a rumbliness tumbly or something that I missed as news. That was a really peculiar bit of news. I'll get back to today's slates, but I hadn't looked at that since the end of yesterday, and I was really curious how that ended up. So, the Bucks. Middleton, again, I like absolutely nothing about the matchup except for the fact that he's been such shit recently, and combined with the really bad matchup and easier guys to pivot to, that he's going to have really low ownership for a guy who just does carry a big ceiling. Last game he took 11 shots. He can take 20, 22. It doesn't take anything that weird for him to end up with a much larger role. Giannis getting in foul trouble will do it. Something of that nature. So, again, I do not like the play on its whole, but $6,600, that makes a lot of sense. Giannis is fine. It is not a good Giannis spot for obvious reasons. Has not been exceptional against the Raptors in the past, and now they had Kawhi Leonard, which obviously doesn't help you. Hasn't been exceptional against Kawhi Leonard in the past. But again, 3-game slate, not a ton of great plays. I only project Giannis for like 55, but very possibly getting 55 out of Giannis for 12.5 or 11 and change still works out to be just great. Obviously comes with a safe floor, probably makes sense as a cash play. But generally, I do prefer Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is, think $2,000 cheaper on FanDuel and $1,700 on DraftKings. That's a lot of cheddar for a guy I project for 3 less fantasy points. So if I'm playing one of those guys, I like Kawhi significantly more, but Giannis still makes sense based on having a real solid floor and having a higher upside. The odds of getting 90 out of Kawhi are basically 0. The odds of getting 90 out of Giannis are not 0. So something to factor in there. Malcolm Brogdon is just fine. Certainly playable in cash. A very, very strong cash play is always present. We don't expect. I'm still not sure George Hill even touches the court. I don't think his role would significantly impact Brogdon's no matter what happens there. But more of a cash play for me. But if he was last man into your tournament lineup, again, on a 3-game slate, certainly not long. Humorously enough, if you look at his performances against the Raptors in his last 4 games, they all land within a half-point median. I can't remember what it was, but I looked earlier today, and his last 4 games against the Raptors are like 26.8, 27, 27.3, and 27 fantasy points, which is pretty amusing. So feel safe projecting him for about 27. Again, those past results don't matter that much. 3 out of the 4, actually 4 out of the 4 were sans Kawhi, as one example. No radically different Raptors team, but a funny sort of simulacrum of numbers there, if you're into that sort of thing, like me. Brook Lopez is always going to be fine to play in a tournament. I would probably rather play Jonas Valanciunas, though on DK you're looking at a significant savings. On FanDuel they're pretty close to the same. I think Jovel may actually be a little bit cheaper. I don't particularly like either play, but they are both guys who carry a real upside with them and are in play on any 3-game slate, certainly. Really sort of on any 10-game slate. Serge Ibaka will start. I expect Serge Ibaka to play a lot of minutes. Serge Ibaka does a very good job guarding Brolo and can follow him around. Irrelevantly, he scored like 45 or 50 against Brolo and the Bucks earlier this year, Son Giannis and everything, but that had much more to do with Kawhi not being there and the usage flowing around. You got big games in there from Kawhi, who shot 3 for 14 in that game and still had 45 or something, but you also got similar 45-ish out of Pascal, Serge. Those have much more to do with Kawhi being absent than anything to do with the Bucks, who are still an absolutely fine defensive team, even though being faster than average as far as the pace goes. I would play Pat Connaughton before I played Tony Snell. I would probably, if I'm looking to take a random bench piece from this game, I would have them Connaughton, Ilyasova, Snell. And then Eric Bledsoe, not a particularly great spot for him. I like him in tournaments, again, for being a little safer than Middleton, a little higher owned than Middleton. A lot of people will go to Lowry, although Lowry with Kawhi has been a pretty consistent disappointment this year. So I think I'd rather take a shot on Bledsoe. If I had to play just one of those guys, though, it's interesting. It's very close. It's a little bit price dependent, but I don't like a lot from the Bucks. They're all priced fairly to even a little bit high. I mean, Bledsoe's 7.9 on DK. It's a lot to ask for Eric Bledsoe against the Raptors. So I don't like a lot of this team, but obviously on a 16 3-game slate, we're going to have to pick some dudes that we are not absolutely in love with. If we go over and look at the Raptors, Bertans out. Okay, well that's interesting, because I didn't mind Bertans, and now you have no Bertans and no Cunningham. So that's a team that's going to run small. So I will speed through this, and we'll get to the Spurs a little faster, because that was like 10 minutes too long for a Bucks team that I don't really like. So I'll be a little more succinct here. Danny Green, a not ideal play in cash or in tournaments. Is consistently getting big minutes. We like that. Tends to get 32, got 38 or 39 once even recently. But, last game played 32 minutes in a pretty good matchup with the Nets and had like 9 fantasy points. So Danny Green in play in tournaments. Danny Green kind of in play in cash, but I would think you could do a little bit better there. Kyle Lowry with Kawhi in has been shit. Of the, 16 games they've played next to each other this year, 17 maybe. He's been, good only a couple of them, and even the upside seems pretty significantly muted. This isn't a incredibly good matchup for him. The price on DK all the way down to 7,600 gives him some cash equity, though again he has 2 games in the 20s, maybe even his last 2 games. I'm just going to click on his profile here and see if it comes up. Hey, it does. So yeah, he played 36 minutes against the Nets at 24 fantasy points. Game before that, he played Philadelphia, which is a matchup we like for point guards. Played 33 minutes and had 26 fantasy points. Then 34 against Denver. 46 against Golden State with Kawhi in, so that's, you know, but before that game, 33, 29, 35. This has been unimpressive, just does not seem incredibly engaged. And maybe that is sort of by design. He does not need to take over on a team this deep. But I'm not thrilled with that play. At 8,100, I really like Kawhi. I have him for a peg over 50. 10-4 on FanDuel, prices very well for me. 9-5 on DK, prices very much for me. I will take a brief look at our ownership here. And he is, I doubt this has been updated, but I will take a check. But we currently have him for our second most popular player on DraftKings. So a lot of people are coming to the same conclusion. Not discernibly more than Giannis. Again, premium members can see this whole list. So we have Kawhi at 38%, Giannis at 31%. I'm going to go ahead and play Kawhi there and save myself my $2,000. Interesting. Looking at the rest of this ownership. Yep. No, they have most of the good plays up towards the top here, so I'm going to be looking more for guys I like who are not towards the top here. Serge Ibaka we have well lower than these other guys. He projects very nicely for me. FanDuel price not as advantageous. I think he's 66, 67. He's 5,800 on DK. That's just really good. I think he plays north of 30 minutes here. It's a better matchup for him. He's performed in the past, although, again, Tom's Kawhi in every single one of those games. Not thrilling, but 5,800 feels good. There's a ceiling there. I feel like 30 is a reasonable guess. 25 seems safe. 40 seems possible. $5,800 on a short slate. He is one of the better point per dollar plays on the slate. Jonas Valanciunas, certainly in play in tournaments. You can get a blowout. You can just get the Bucks not really having any centers who can defend him with any reasonable degree of equity. And even if he only plays 17 minutes, he can put up 35 fantasy points. No issue if you go there in tournaments. I slightly prefer him to Brolo. If I have to go with one of those guys, I'm that firm a believer in Brolo being a sort of a sticky wicket here. Fred VanVleet, same thing, always in playing tournaments. Much prefer on FanDuel where he's 4,000 as opposed to 4,200 on DK and 4,000 obviously on FanDuel. You can drop him. You can randomly pick up a 30 there, but certainly not in love with it. The minutes for OG Anunoby have come down where you're seeing 17, 18, 20 minutes out of him most games. I don't think I necessarily want to go there, and I don't want to Delon Wright, which is something someone else asked about. Let's move on to our second game real quick. The Jazz and the Spurs. So White, god damn it, I knew this. I was about to guess the Spurs starters. I'm 3 for 3 on guessing starting lineups today, even with the Pellies, which was a little tricking. They will start White next to Forbes and run small. Shift DeRozan to the 3, Gay to the 4, and Aldridge to the 5. That feels pretty good, and that opens up those guys as punts I'm happier with. Now, I'm not thrilled with any of these guys, but Bryn Forbes, Derek White, and Patty Mills all are going to pick up a few extra minutes here as this team runs really small. So will Marco Bellinelli. So the absence of Bertans and the absence of Cunningham feels pretty good if you're trying to take some shares of the Spurs here, and they're one of the teams that I am actually a little more interested in selecting here. Now, again, this is I suppose objectively the shittiest of the games on this 3-game slate, but like all the games on this slate, it's got a line of basically 3 points. So talking about these Spurs more, of those 3 guys, sorry, I'm just going through how the rotations are going to go in my head versus the Jazz. Right, so I think Mills is now my favorite by a fair amount. Again, I'm going to like all these guys more on FanDuel where they can be droppable. I almost like playing 2 of them on FanDuel because you get to drop 1. Although Derek White is 500 more on FanDuel. He is 42 versus only 37 on DK. None of these guys are still great. I would still project them all for in the range of 17 to 22 fantasy points. This is obviously not an ideal matchup against a very good Jazz defensive team. And again, these 2 teams did play just a week ago, I think, give or take. And Utah pushed San Antonio shit in pretty hard in Utah, but beat them by... no one played any appreciable minutes on either side of the game. They all played 24, 26, 27 because Utah so dramatically kicked their ashes. So So let's talk. I like DeRozan again. He's just perennially under-owned. I'm going to click here on what we have for his ownership protection. Choose words. Those rhyme. It's low. It's under 20%. I'm a big fan of that at under 20%. I think... Sorry, I'm, again, trying to figure out exactly how the defenses are going to go here as they work through their rotations. I generally will prefer DeRozan to Aldridge. Now, on FanDuel, that makes it pretty easy. Points per dollar. Ownership, I imagine, similar. DeRozan's 88. Aldridge is 85. On DK, DeRozan's 87 and Aldridge is 73. That's enough where I think Aldridge is probably a slightly better points per dollar play, and has had some big games against Utah in the past, against Gobert. You know, had a 65er last year, though I think that might have been overtime. But it's certainly a position where I do think he still carries a ceiling, but I think more often than not you're going to see DeRozan taking the lion's share of the offense on this team. So generally I'm happier about playing DeRozan than Aldridge, if I had to reduce it down to that. Of the punts, I'm going to go with Mills, White, Forbes in the order that I like those. I'm fine playing 2. 3 is probably strictly wrong, but 2, especially on FanDuel, makes some sense. They all end up being, you know, 18 to 22 fantasy points projected for me. But I'll go with Mills, White, Forbes as the order to play those 3 guys. Rudy Gay is a bit of a conundrum for me. But I'm much more happy with all these other forwards out. DK is down to $5,600. I still prefer Ibaka, but it's now fairly close for me. His minutes are going to have to trend up. The Spurs, not one of the teams on a back-to-back, which gives us a little more confidence there. Again, the Jazz play again tomorrow. The Spurs do not. Yeah, I mentioned Bellinelli. If you're saying how does Bellinelli rank with those other guys, it ends up being a little sites, man. DK, I think he's actually the cheapest of those 4 players. Give me a second. Let me load up the sites, and I will take a look here because it seems like it needs to be specified. On DraftKings, Bellinelli is barely the cheapest. You have Mills at 39, White at 37, Forbes at 35, and Bellinelli at 34. I think I will actually take Bellinelli 4th among those guys, but I'm making some guesswork as to how the game plays. But I think he actually comes in with a fewer minutes than all those guys. So I will go with Mills. I will go with the order they're priced on DK, actually. I think is appropriate for how I would project their points. I will go Mills, White, Forbes, Bellinelli. Checking over on FanDuel, if it chooses to load, which apparently it's having some consternation about. I'll check those prices in a second. But I don't draw a large distinction between these guys. Like, if I was to project them, there'd be increments of like a point between them. You'd be looking at 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, I think. And again, I don't have time to take 10 minutes and pencil it out and figure out exactly who's going to play X minutes against who and go back and look at the history. But that's my gut for the order on them, but I'm not super confident in it and wouldn't think there would be a large differentiation between them regardless. Looking at the Spurs on FanDuel, you have Mills 37, White 42. Those are the point guards, and then I think we have Bryn at shooting guard again. Is that right? No, we don't. Shooting guard is objectively hilarious. Okay. Hey, you around here? Somehow I've misplaced Bryn Forbes. Where'd you go? There he is. Oh, he's a point guard too. Okay. So there I'd rather pay the $200 for Mills, and I'd certainly rather have Mills over Derek White for $500 less. Yeah, and then Bellinelli there, I believe, is a 2. No, I just can't find Marco Bellinelli. Bellinelli. Anywhere? Okay, we'll back out a little bit here. He is a 2. He is minimum price. I couldn't find him for a reason I can't adequately describe. But I guess the big news here is that I do like almost all of these guys because of the few more minutes other than options I would have preferred for them a little while ago. So I liked Malik Monk a fair amount tonight. Now, Malik Monk is only $3,300 on DK. has seen a few more minutes recently. The matchup is obviously exceptional and carries the ability to randomly drop 30 for you in very few minutes. So, but at this point, I would have to jettison him in favor of all of these Spurs guards who, now pick up an average of 2.5 minutes apiece or something like that. But all right, so we like Rudy Gay. When he has to play 30 minutes, part of the reason that is priced in is that those minutes are specious for him. So I will still slightly project Ibaka higher, but I prefer Rudy Gay to, say, Joe Ingles at very similar prices. And I think it's just fine should you arrange to have some up in your life today. It seems like enough of the Spurs. Let's go across and talk about the Jazz, rather. I think I like Rubio the most of these, especially at the DK price. I like both the guards on this team a little more than the guys as we get bigger. We'll spend a little time talking about Rudy Gobert in a second, but Ricky Rubio, probably my favorite player on this team. The team going small helps him more. He has always been fairly good against the Spurs for a number of years. He does a decent job of operating against their the similar Popovich defensive system that they've been running for a number of years. It's actually an above-average matchup for him, which is not true of many players. Point guard against the Spurs has been a position I've tried to target a few times this year. There was the Arcidiacono game where he hadn't had a game over however many fantasy points in a while, and I went, this is the first time I'm calling this guy's name out, and it was the first of his 2 consecutive 40 games. Rubio or Lowry is Rubio for me fairly easily. I have Ricky Rubio projected for 1.1 fantasy points less than Kyle Lowry, and he saves you $1,300 and $800 or something. I will check the ownership, but I have a feeling that they're pretty similar. Well, I'll give you another free cookie here for the ownership. Ricky Rubio currently projected at 34%. Kyle Lowry, 34%. We have them identically. And that's just, that's something to do with the over. I mean, the first game, the Kyle Lowry game, is the fastest game of the evening. Although I'd like to point out the fastest game of the evening the other day was the 240 contest with these same Bucks, and that game ended up scoring 200 points total. So it missed the over-under by, 40. It's just not a small number. Just to say that a projected over-under differential of 10 does not send shivers up and down my spine. So anyhow, I would rather play Ricky Rubio than Lowry. I would rather play Donovan Mitchell than Kyle Lowry, especially with them going small. His ability to back down gets better. I'm not thrilled with the idea of playing both of them, but on a 3-game slate, it isn't out of play for me. They're both obviously also objectively a little bit more underpriced on DraftKings. Not a great spot for Ingles. Going smaller helps him. There's going to be some fair period of time which you have DeRozan trying to guard him, which gives him some back down ability. But Ingles, I like more. I generally like the guys on this team less as they get larger. So I'll pivot right to, so it has not been a good matchup for Favors. I don't expect it to be again. He's coming off a huge game, but that involved Rudy Gobert being conspired against by the referees and ejected for knocking over somebody's sippy cup like 3 minutes into the last game. FanDuel 9,800 for Gobert. He's not out of play, and 8,200 for DK. It's obviously fine. When I say he's not out of play on FanDuel, I'm not being facetious. I would rather save $2,600 and play Enes Kanter. I'd rather play almost any other center in my first lineup. I'd probably, in cash, he makes a lot of sense. So when they wrecked the Spurs the last time they played, he was really good, and that gives me some pause. But generally in games where the Spurs have gone small and games where Aldridge has started at center, Rudy Gobert has been pretty bad. If you go back and check game logs over the last couple years and just look for games where LaMarcus Aldridge started at center versus Rudy Gobert, he has not been that effective. Aldridge does a fairly good job at keeping him positionally away from where he wants to be. So that mostly means boxing out, but it also means cutting off passing lanes, and just the action tends to flow to Rubio and Donovan Mitchell, who tend to slightly overproduce in this matchup. So Gobert was great in the 24 minutes he played the last time these two teams met, and had like 40 fantasy points. I don't even remember, but a big number in very little time. And it could certainly happen again, and we'll never know if this is right or wrong, but I'm a little bit disinclined from playing Rudy Gobert. Now, I think we have him projected, even on DK, for only around 20%. At that point, I'd want a fair amount. I suspect it may come in over that number, but we currently have a Rudy Gobert number of actually sitting at 16%. And I argue with the ownership projections a lot, and they win more often than I do, because there's a lot of guys putting them together. It's like arguing with Vegas. It's one guy against many. You don't tend to win. So, you know, all the starters in this game are in play. Jay Crowder is in play. Those 6 guys on a 3-game slate are just fine to play basically anywhere you want them to. My interest in playing them just sort of raw points versus salary would probably go Rubio, Mitchell, Gobert, Ingles, Favors, Crowder, I think, in that order. Yep. Yes, you can play Royce O'Neal if you want to. I wouldn't try to. Yes, you can play Kyle Korver if you want to. He's not doing much, but yanking a couple minutes away from Jingles. Let's go ahead and look at our final game. The Hornets and the Knicks. The Knicks, again, on the back end of a back-to-back. So I got them completely right and completely wrong yesterday. I got them completely right as to say the guy I like most was Enes Kanter. That worked out. It was an incredible center day. You had a couple guys disappoint like Towns, but you had massive games out of Jokic and Kanter and Tristan Thompson and Nurkic. And like there were many, many guys who put up in the area of 50 to 60. So huge games out of a lot of centers yesterday. A couple centers I really like in this game, obviously. Cody Zeller is just too cheap flat out on DraftKings. Does not carry the world's largest upside, but they're going to want him out there against Kanter. $4,000 on DK is just objectively too cheap of a price for a guy with the game that he profiles. Yeah, like if you expect him to play 32 minutes and give you 26.5 fantasy points, and for $4,000, that's just way the hell too cheap. Pretty hard not to play Zeller, and he's one of our chalkiest guys for that reason. And it's actually, you know, objectively a great matchup for him because it's a big center. They want to keep him out there, lots of time for him. But both Kanter and, say, Mitchell Robinson are both shit defensively. So, it's a really good spot for Cody Zeller. Hard not to like that. I also like both power forwards. I like all 4 bigs in this game. Marvin, the one I like the least, priced a little more advantageously on FanDuel. He's $4,900 on both sites, I believe. Looked good in the last game. You know, scored more than a fantasy point a minute, played 32 minutes, made some 3-pointers, looks 100% healthy. Position is a bit of a wasteland. Of these 4 players, he's the one I like the least, but especially at the FanDuel price, I'm just fine with you having any share of Marvin. And Noah Vonleh is more of a FanDuel play, but he just profiles, again, too cheap. So, again, talking about the Knicks yesterday, looking at that game overall, I liked 4 Knicks, and Kanter was the only one that was good. Tim Hardaway Jr. Got plenty of time, but was bad. Emmanuel Mudiay got less time than he had been getting. I think he got 26 last night. He had been getting pretty consistently 32-ish for a few games in a row. That went away. So that and just playing badly, he disappointed. And again, on the Knicks, playing badly pretty directly leads to having your minutes reduced. Fizdale runs a short leash, has a lot of guys he wants to give time to. So if you're not doing well, you can get yanked. So if this is your first day of playing DFS this year, everyone on the Knicks comes with a perilously low floor. Basically, other than Tim Hardaway, who still, just by nature of his game, comes with a low floor. He, yesterday, was bad. He had about 15 fantasy points in his 30-whatever-the-hell minutes. His minutes are secure. He just comes with a floor because, well, he's Tim Hardaway. And Vonleh was not exciting yesterday either. And additionally, I was super concerned that that the Nets would limit their minutes on the back end of a back-to-back, and it wasn't too bad. I don't think anybody got more than, like, 31. But as far as Kenny Atkinson raping the Nets minutes goes, that was a fairly gentle raping. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson was legitimately very good. You wanted him and everything, but you got a very good game out of Dinwiddie. You know, D. Russ got 30 minutes, wasn't tremendous with them, certainly didn't pay off that price tag. But Jared Allen, who we suspected would be pretty good for 5,800, played, I think, also 26 minutes before he fouled out. But, you know, hit his double-double and was very good in that time, too. So it was interesting. But that game did not read quite as well as I wanted outside of, obviously, Kanter being the guy. But getting back to this evening, I like Mudiay about as much as I did last night, where I think I had him as my third favorite Nick. I had him ahead of Hardaway behind Vonleh and Kanter. He is objectively a worse play today in a matchup I'm not quite as happy with. Although this is, it's still an above-average matchup. The Nets have been better than advertised, and the pace has been much lower than we expected. So his price has come up. He was 58 on both last night. He's now, I believe, 6 flat and 6,100 on the two sites. He still, I think, has I'll say 65% chance of playing 30-plus minutes tonight. Which is not comforting as many other players. Like Kemba Walker has a 91% chance of playing 30-plus minutes tonight. Maybe a little less because of the potential of a blowout, but again, this game is like a 5-point line. But because of coming off a bad game, I expect his ownership to stay pretty nominal. I'll go ahead and throw another number at you here. We have Emmanuel Mudiay projected for 18%. And he can certainly get on top of a pretty nominal price tag of 6K. Again, last night was a bad game for him. He played 26 minutes, had 17 fantasy points. That's bad. The game before that against Boston, played 34 minutes, had 28 fantasy points. Game before that against Washington, played 36 minutes, had 27 fantasy points. Game before that against Milwaukee, played 36 minutes, had 42 fantasy points. So, Charlotte not an opposing matchup, certainly not compared to Milwaukee or Boston from amongst those where he managed to have productive games. So 6K certainly makes sense. I would rather play Ricky Rubio, but I am not against playing Emmanuel Mudiay. I'm very close when it comes to whether or not I would rather play Emmanuel Mudiay or Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker is going to be twice, if not 2.5 times as owned, and while obviously has a remarkably secure role and an even better matchup when you want to go against playing against the Knicks, and will get his 30 minutes unless this game gets out of hand in a real hurry. He has not been great recently. Like, you're giving you some minutes and scoring from Kemba Walker, that production has come down. Last game he played 36 minutes against Denver, which doesn't bother us, 41 fantasy points. Game before that, 30 minutes against the Timberwolves, 27. Timberwolves are very good defensively recently. But against the Pelicans, 32 minutes, 28. I'm not skipping any. This is all of them. Against Utah, 37 minutes, 35 fantasy points. Against Atlanta, 34 minutes, 40 fantasy points. Before that, against Milwaukee, 38 minutes, 40 fantasy points. Before that, against Atlanta, again, 34 minutes, 47 fantasy points. He's still 8,500, 8,900. Compare him to Kawhi, or compare him to, like, some of these other guys. It's been a while. He has not scored 50 fantasy points in 10 games. That's a long time. Now, before that, he was crushing people, but he's not managed to get up 50 recently, including 2 games against the Hawks and a game against the Pelicans. So this is a game against the Knicks. I like him. I think he's going to score. I have him projected for 44. It's a perfectly fine number. But, if I objectively look at these two guys, the most likely game for me out of Kemba Walker at this point is, 33 minutes, 44 fantasy points. That feels fine. But the most likely game for me out of just Emmanuel Mudiay, who I'm not that huge of a fan of, would be 32 minutes and 28 fantasy points for $2,500, $3,000 less. So I know a lot of people are excited to see Kemba from where he was at, 9,900 for a while there, but this, based on his production over his last 8, 9, 10 games, is not super sexy and exciting. So I have no issue with you playing Kemba in anything. In cash, he does really have like a 40-point floor. That feels good. In tournaments, while we haven't seen it for a while, he absolutely has a 60-something pointer in the bag. We like that this is an island game. That feels good. They're not at home, which is another thing with Kemba. Kemba has really pronounced home road splits in his career. Whatever, moving on, we talked plenty about Kemba there. Jeremy Lamb, still, again, probably fine in cash, coming off one bad game, but before that had been giving you 30, 40, 35, 30, 40 for a while there. Had looked really good. I don't have an issue with you playing Jeremy Lamb in anything. Yep, more or less. Not a ton to add there. Yeah, Nick Batum, 3-game slate, fine to play in tournaments. Wouldn't touch him in cash. Had one good game 2 games ago and surrounded it by 6 shitty games, but that's what it is. Marvin, we already discussed. Cody, we already discussed. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at 3,800 on DK, I think is just fine to play in tournaments. FanDuel, Tony Parker is only 3,600. That sort of squeaks him in there as a tournament play, although I would now have him behind all 3 Spurs point guards because of what's going on there. With everyone back and healthy, with Marvin there, with MKG back, Miles Bridges seems unnecessary. Certainly on FanDuel where he's 5-something, and on DK as well at 3,900. As far as the Knicks go, Courtney Lee has re-entered the rotation, so that already asshole wing rotation is even shittier now. So again, if you think Mudiay is going to get 30-something at point guard, and I do, and if you think Tim Hardaway is going to get 30-something at the 2, and I do. We've even seen a couple games recently where Hazonia is starting to get, not a lot of minutes, but 20, 22, 23. It's just a nightmare where now you're trying to pack in that entire, and Vonleh gets a lot of minutes starting, so that entire Alonzo Trier, Damian Dotson, Kevin Knox, Courtney Lee, that whole wing situation is a goddamn nightmare. If I had to play one of them, I probably stick with Alonzo Trier, who they like a lot. I was going to say irrationally, but no, rationally. He's looked pretty good in some of these games. He's still priced in the mid to high 3s. Again, I prefer everyone on the Spurs. But 3,600, 3,700, I would go there before I go with Dotson, who's 43 on DK and 58 on FanDuel. Some crazy number for him on FanDuel. Damian Dotson is like $700, $800 more than Noah Vonleh. That's crackers. Hazonia, min price, or 3,200 in play. If you want to fire that bullet, you can randomly pull 20 out of him. Droppable on FanDuel. Yeah, so I'm going to do a news check, answer some emails, check what all you guys are saying, and answer some questions. We got about 13 minutes as we get towards lock. Someone asked Rubio, Vonleh, and J-Val, or Bledsoe, Green, and J Lamb in a DK GPP. Yeah, I would go Rubio, Vonleh, and J-Val. Rubio I legit like just points per dollar. J-Val obviously has a massive ceiling. Bledsoe can certainly get there, even though I'm not thrilled with the matchup. I'm sorry, J-Val obviously has the world's biggest ceiling, and Vonleh is your other guy who, again, I objectively like. The other side is Bledsoe, who we've discussed, Danny Green, who does not frequently get to a GPP upside very often, and J Lamb, who's expensive enough now that he really doesn't get to what you would consider an upside very often now. So yeah, I would prefer Rubio, Vonleh, and Valanciunas. Not buying into the Kemba playing at MSG narrative. He had one very good game there that I recall. Surrounded it with a couple fairly bad games there, if I remember. I will go back. How do I want to look this up? I will look this up here. We're talking about Kemba games against the Knicks where he's in New York. Okay. Last one, played 25 minutes and had 14 fantasy points. Is that good? Doesn't seem good. Last time Kemba played Madison Square Garden, he played 25 minutes, had 14.3 fantasy points. The time before that at MSJ, played 33 minutes, had 39 fantasy points. Time before that, this is the one I remember, I think. Yeah. 37 minutes, 55. That's pretty good. The time before that, 32 minutes, 34. The time before that, 35 minutes, 49. And again, these are years ago where 49 out of Kemba was a pretty noticeable event. Before that, 46 and 38. Before that, 41 and 28. Before that, 22 and 30. So, no, I think that's absolutely nothing. He was average 2 games ago, legitimately bad his last game. Before that, there was a very nice string. But, that I think pretty clearly is not a trend. Favorite guard under 4,500 on DraftKings? Is Cody Zeller a guard? That's a little joke. Let us go then, you and I, and take a look. Jesus Christmas. Probably Patty Mills. Yep. Patty Mills. I don't have a problem in a tournament if you want to play Tony Parker or Danny Green or Fred VanVleet or Damian Dotson. All those are fine to play in a tournament. But Mills is the safest of them and carries a pretty similar upside. George Hill, by the way, marked as out on DraftKings. Just you know, you're going to get 0.2% George Hill. I don't like George Hill. I'm not even sure he plays, but it seems relevant to note that he's marked as out on DraftKings when he is, you know, not out. Well, speaking of marked as out, E'Twaun Moore was supposed to play, and then like a minute after lock on the early slate today, they said E'Twaun Moore has been ruled out, which didn't much matter. Not many people had E'Twaun Moore. And then the next thing I knew, E'Twaun Moore checked into the game. So that's fun. Mills or White straight up? I'm going to take Mills straight up. Kemba and Vonleh or Mitchell and Hardaway on DK. Yeah, Mitchell is always going to be in play for me in tournaments. Speaking about Mitchell Robinson, I'm assuming we're not talking about Donovan Mitchell. Maybe you are there. But Mitchell Robinson's always going to be in play in tournaments for me for just canter foul trouble or wicked block upside. He gets a lot of fouls in a hurry, but priced at 3, whatever the hell. Certainly on a 3-game slate, you can throw him in there. What's up with Poeltl? You know, I didn't mention Jakob Poeltl, and that's a good call. Had his best game of the year against the Spurs. Now, that had more to do with the blowout run because they got crushed. They got curb stomped. Then, like, we need a big body. But you know, have, you know, basically 2 power forwards out for the Spurs. And he's going to have to pick up some time. Gasol obviously still out. So I like Jakob Poeltl in tournaments. I think I left him in my pool for that reason. But thank you for the reminder. No issue with you playing Jakob Poeltl. I mean, you can get a monster. You know, you can get your Daniel Tice game out of him. You just need 2 quick fouls on Aldridge or something like that. But possibility of a blowout. So, yeah, I like Jakob Poeltl quite a bit in tournaments. Good question. Thank you. Touchdown. MKG and Middleton or White and THJ? Well, it's funny because THJ and Middleton are so similar today. I'll take White and THJ between those two. Close. How comfortable are you high going for ownership on Zeller? I expect it to be, you know, around the 50% area. We have him projected as the highest player on the slate. We have him at 58. And I'm still fine with it. Like, feel free to get away from it. The odds that he drops 40 and ruins your day are pretty unlikely. And obviously he can, you know, randomly turn an ankle. We did well with the chalk yesterday. We started the show and looked at the chalk. I said, Burks is good chalk. Don't leave Burks. Lyles is great chalk. Don't leave Lyles. I was strongly considering dropping the 100K, 100% tag on Lyles at like 3,600. Like, that was just way the hell too good. And they both put up 30. That worked. I said the first guy I'd get away from was Bazemore or Trae Young. Bazemore was fine. Young was objectively bad. So we did pretty well with the chalk, I think, yesterday. But Zeller is good chalk. Donovan Mitchell, Hardaway, or Kemba and Vonleh on DK. I do like Jakob. I'm going to come back to that because I'm still stuck on that 2x2 there. Trifecta, I'm not trying to avoid you. Do I like Poeltl more than Brook Lopez or DK GPP? Yeah, on the face of it, I do generally like Jakob Poeltl more as a tournament play than Brook Lopez. This is just not... like, Brook Lopez, for him to hit the ceiling game. And Brook Lopez is cheap and can grab 10 rebounds and can get 30-plus minutes and can make a pile of threes. But this is not the team to expect him to do any of those things against. So, and not that playing against the Spurs is any great treat, but saving the money and for significantly reduced ownership, yeah, I would rather play Poeltl in a tournament. Objectively, I'm happier with that play than playing Brook Lopez. They're both fine, but that's how I feel. Oh, God, the terms have started coming in. I have Poeltl because no salary with Giannis and Leonard. Yeah, that's fine. It makes sense. I have no problem with the turtle. Kemba and Rubio, sure, they are point guards. You may play them. Bellinelli, that makes a fair amount of sense. You faded Kemba, that was hard. It shouldn't be that hard. Like, I'm much more excited to play DeRozan than Kemba. That's just me. But we'll see. Poeltl or Zeller? Zeller and cash, pretty clearly. Poeltl is an absolutely fine tournament rotation to make there. Hi ho, Bert. Davis Bertans. Bert. Bert. Beep, beep. Beep, beep. Brogdon or Lamb in a DK GPP? I'll probably go Lamb. I would just raw project him for like 2.5 more points. And he carries a higher ceiling, so I'm pretty... I feel much better playing Lamb. There. Can you fade Kawhi and Greek Freak? Sure, just don't play them. See, that was easy. It's a little tougher to spend the money. But yeah, there's no guarantee either of those guys are amazing. There's a real chance you get 45 out of Kawhi and 53 out of Giannis, and that makes them both fadeable. You need the other guys you spend that money on to convert for you. I want to play Lowry probably, or certainly Ibaka, and, you know, Middleton or Bledsoe in that lineup. But yeah, I think those are absolutely reasonable pivots. To Cantor or not to Cantor? To Cantor. There's nothing wrong with the spot whatsoever. Last night was very frustrating. Again, obviously, I was all over him. I said I started my lineup today with Cantor and Jokic, and neither of them disappointed. But Cantor went out, 9 minutes into the third and never came back. That was a little frustrating. He had 48.5 fantasy points in 26 minutes. They never brought him back. But that makes me happier today, because if they brought him back, that game was down to a 7-point game with 5 minutes to go, and they didn't bring Cantor back. I was for those of you who were in the premium Slack chat, I was cursing fizzy lifting drink there a little bit as that occurred. But I feel much better about him getting 30 tonight than I would have if he played 32 last night. Pirtle or Robinson DK GPP? That's close for me, but I'll go with Pirtle. Vonleh and Ibaka are projected pretty similar. Which one do you think has more GPP upside in today's matchups? I'm going to slightly hedge towards Vonleh. Vonleh in what we'll call a neutral matchup can just get, 3 3-pointers and 21 points, 14 rebounds, 2 blocks and a steal. Like, that's not a line that shocks me. He needs to get the minutes. The game needs to stay close. The coach needs to not fuck him. Ibaka with both Lowry and more importantly Kawhi in there, it's just a little less likely that he hits his ceiling game. So trying to spike a ceiling there, FanDuel, I'll save the money. You save like $1,700. DK, it's $100 difference, as Ibaka is well cheaper and Vonleh is more expensive. Do you play Cantor and Vonleh together, or do they cap each other's ceiling? Again, on a 3-game slate, that's not something I'm worried about. I'm looking at the FanDuel placeholder I have, and it has Cantor and Vonleh in it. It's not ideal. You're not like, sweet, I have them both. Although, again, I really don't like the first game. And the second game, there's obviously some issues with. So, again, this placeholder lineup I'm looking at has 5 guys in the Charlotte-New York game. So I'm sort of game stacking it. So I feel just fine having them in there. I'm not happy about it. But, again, the price on both of them is a little less than it should be. And it's a 3-game slate, so you sort of have to... You know what I'm saying? So is it okay that they're both in there? Yes, it's fine. Is it good? No, you're not cheering the fact. It's negatively correlated. There are only so many rebounds. This is an amazing rebounding team, by the way, with both those guys in there. Both Vonleh and Enes Kanter are elite rebounders. If I was taking one person from the late game, who would it be? It's site dependent, because of the limited number of center spots in some place. So like on FanDuel, the one person I would take from the late game would be Noah Vonleh. On DK... probably Cantor. It's cool you are locked in. Yeah, we should be coming up on it now. But yeah. Big fan of Kawhi, but he is going to be well owned. Just scanning for news at the moment. We are coming up under a minute here. $55 seconds. I apologize. I could talk just to fill dead air, but instead I'm going to try to do a better job of making sure we don't miss any news. Someone just sent me a sorry thank you. Thanks for everything. Okay, we're all good. If we're good, yeah, we're good. That is good, and that is good. Alright, moving from the double update to the tweet deck. Same starters for Knicks. That's what we expected. Yada yada. Nothing new there. Nothing new there. 15 seconds. Clement will not return. George Kittle is good at football. These are all very useful things for us. All right. That is locked, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and check some ownership on these early slates. I'm not even logged in anymore. Okay, one sec. All right. Let's check in and see how things are going in that Detroit-New Orleans game. It finished. New Orleans ended up on top. Anthony Davis making a triumphant return. Almost got a 4x5. 26 minutes. 6 points. 6 points. I mean, he was hurt, but 6 points. I wonder if Drew Holiday had as dumb of a game as it looked like he was going to. Tapered off a little bit, but anyhow, Anthony Davis, 6 points, 4 assists, 9 rebounds, 5 blocks. 26 minutes. Julius Randle, 28, 6, 5, and 2. He's good. Only 1 turnover, so yep. He was good. Solomon Hill, 5.8 rebounds, nothing else. Yeah, it's very Solomon Hill line. Drew Holiday, 22 shots, 14 of 22, 6 of 10 from 3. Made all of his free throws. 37 points, 3 steals, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 9 turnovers. So FanDuel, that's 28, 37, 44.5, and 6, 50.5. So you got a 50 burger out of Drew, which okay, it was $9,500, so it wasn't like it's the world's best deal. Tim Frazier took 5 shots, made 4 of them, made all 4 of his free throws. 14, 8, 3, and 2. Really good assist guy. Mirotic off the bench, again, not impressive. 12, 7, 2 blocks. Etuan Moore was out, so he only played 16 minutes, 4 points, 2 rebounds. Not much else. The Pistons, Blake ended up with 35, 5, 2, 1, and 1. Drummond ended up with 23 and 19, 1, 1, and 1. I said Griffin over Blake, and I think that's right. Actually, I'm not sure here. All right, let's see. In points, Blake's up 12. In rebounds, he goes up another. That's 13. They each had a steal and a block. He goes up another for an assist. He's up 14 and a half, and then Drummond had 14 more rebounds. So, nope. Drummond outscored him by 1.5 or something. FanDuel scoring. DK, Drummond. Well, it would have been really close because 4 3-pointers for Blake. Drummond missed his only 3-pointer attempt, but Drummond gets the double-double bonus and an extra 0.5 per rebound. Anyhow, they were basically even. Reggie Jackson, 26 minutes, 2 points, 7 assists, 2 steals. That's not good. 1 of 6 from the field. That's not good. Glenn Robinson started 15 minutes as opposed to 16 minutes last game. That was a pretty Glenn Robinson line. He had a rebound and a foul. That's it. 1 rebound, 1 foul. Bruce Brown started and got 19 minutes. So, Luke Kennard got time finally. That's nice. I was wondering who got the Bruce Brown minutes. Because last game, this is about what we got, except Bruce Brown played 30 or whatever. 7 and 1, 2 blocks. John Lure had a very nice monster duck over Randall and Check Diallo. 13 minutes, 4 out of 5 from the field, 9, 4, and 1. It's good in 13 minutes. But Langston Galloway, again, the big bench guy here, took 20 shots in 37 minutes. So, again, where he's still sitting around minimum price, we are going to have no Reggie Bullock for probably at least another game, though we'll see. No Ish Smith for a while. No Stanley Johnson again today. So a lot of minutes were around. You got 37 minutes for Langston. 20 shots, 24 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. That's good at minimum price. Hashtag analysis. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, stuff. So I am Fast 80 Fear. I will be back again tomorrow. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with me. Generally seemed like it was a pretty good week. Hopefully we will keep it rolling coming into this coming week. If I missed anything, if you have any further questions or comments, feel free to find me in the premium Slack chat if you are a member at awesemo.com. Otherwise, send me a tweet. Y'all have a great day.